Zhang Ruokan sat at the bottom of the water, calming down. His face did not change color, mobilizing the true qi in his body, running in the three meridians. True qi, every time it runs around, that pain will weaken a few points. With his current martial arts cultivation, he can't keep his breath in the water to cultivate, and every 5 minutes, he will go to the water to change his qi. As an hour passed, the pain gradually subsided, and a cold air flow entered the body to repair the damaged body. The refreshing sensation permeates the whole body, and it almost makes people moan. Wow! Zhang Ruokan stood up from the water, wiped the water droplets on his body with a bath, stood in front of a bronze mirror and looked at his body, and nodded. After cultivating for more than 10 days, coupled with the tempering of the medicinal bath, his body was obviously a little stronger. Unlike before, he was a little sickly thin. 4 days ago, he was just a weak man, driven out of the Yushu palace by the 8th prince, and mercilessly ridiculed and oppressed by everyone. Who knows, 4 days later, he already has the martial arts cultivation in the middle of the yellow extreme realm. It's nothing short of a miracle. It's not enough. The middle stage of the yellow polar realm is just the beginning. Zhang Ruokan clenched his fists tightly, his eyes were very sharp. After putting on his clothes, he took a blood pill and entered the inner space of the space-time spar to continue his cultivation. Being able to reach the middle stage of the yellow pole realm within 4 days was not only because he had martial arts experience in his previous life, but also because of the help of the space-time crystal. With the space-time crystal, he had 3 times more cultivation time than other martial artists. This is his unique advantage. Bang! Bang! It's like galloping. Ruokan's legs were bent, stepping on his steps, his arms were constantly slapping out. Just after soaking in the medicinal bath, you must use the fist technique to integrate all the medicinal power into the body and transform it into your own strength. In the following days, Zhang Ruokan cultivated almost in the inner space of the space-time spar, and only went out of the inner space once every 3 days. Concubine Lin knew that Zhang Ruokan had just opened the divine martial seal, and she would definitely retreat and cultivate, open up the qi pool, and wash the marrow and flush the pulse, so she didn't ask much, but just told Yunar to take good care of Zhang Ruokan's daily life. She will still sell her ornaments, and give the silver coins she gets to Zhang Ruokan to buy blood pills. Often at this time, Zhang Ruokan would ask Yunar to bring silver coins to buy those ornaments back at a quiet high price. This is an indescribable emotion, that kind of selfless care, which moved Zhang Ruokan's heart very much. Gradually, Zhang Ruokan accepted the identity of his current body and regarded Concubine Lin as his real mother. His Royal Highness the 9th Prince, should we tell Concubine Lin the truth? She would be very happy to know that you are now a true martial artist. Yunar said, not for now, I want to surprise her when the year-end assessment comes. Besides, my current cultivation is not strong enough, I need to become stronger. Zhang Ruokan said. Now, Yunar knows a lot of secrets about Zhang Ruokan. Except for the secrets of the previous life and the space-time crystal, Zhang Ruokan told her almost everything else. In Yunar's opinion, His Royal Highness the 9th Prince is simply a great martial arts wizard, and in a short period of time, he has already cultivated to the middle stage of the yellow extreme realm, and the other princes are too far behind His Royal Highness the 9th Prince. Perhaps, only His Royal Highness the 7th Prince, whose cultivation is the best of his generation, can be compared with His Royal Highness the 9th Prince. After reaching the middle stage of the yellow extreme realm, Zhang Ruokan cultivated in the space-time spar for another month, taking a qi-gathering pill every 6 days and taking a medicinal bath every 10 days. At other times, they were all cultivating the second palm of the dragon elephant Prajna palm, flying dragon in the sky, and the meridian diagram of the 9 heavens Ming Emperor Sutra. The second palm of the dragon elephant Prajna palm has not yet been successfully cultivated, but the true qi in the qi pool has been cultivated to perfection. You can start attacking the late stage of the yellow extreme realm tonight. Zhang Ruokan. Hearing this, Yunar was shocked and said, late stage of the yellow extreme realm. His Royal Highness the Ninth Prince has only reached the middle stage of the Yellow Extreme Realm for 10 days, and he can impact the late stage of the Yellow Extreme Realm. It took the 8th Prince 4 years to cultivate from the middle stage of the Yellow Extreme Realm to the late stage of the Yellow Extreme Realm. Yunar didn't know about the existence of the space-time spar, thinking that Zhang Ruokan had only been cultivating for 10 days, but in fact, Zhang Ruokan had been cultivating for a whole month. This is also because he spends a lot of time refining his body, otherwise, his cultivation speed will be faster. Soon. It's just a matter of course. Zhang Ruokan didn't think that his cultivation speed was fast. If those other geniuses had such rich cultivation resources as him, his cultivation speed would definitely be very fast. Took the 8th Prince 4 years to reach the late stage of the Yellow Extreme Realm, only show that his qualifications are too poor. Anyway, at this moment, Yunar was very excited, and said, "Ninth Prince, I believe you will definitely succeed. As long as you reach the late stage of the Yellow Extreme Realm, we won't have to be afraid of the 8th Prince in the future." You go out first. Don't let anyone disturb me tonight. Zhang Ruokan said. Yunar nodded vigorously, like a chicken pecking rice, and said, "Tonight, I will stay outside the door. If anyone dares to disturb the cultivation of the 9th Prince, I will stop him even if I fight to the death." Zhang Ruokan stared at Yunar deeply, and said softly, "Thank you." After Yunar walked out of Zhang Ruokan's room, Zhang Ruokan immediately entered the inner space of the space-time crystal. If I want to break through to the late stage of the Yellow Extreme Realm, I must open up 3 meridians in one go, so that the meridians run through the 5 organs, arms, and feet. Zhang Ruokan took out 3 small jade bottles in a row and put them in a row, and each bottle contained a piece of pulp washing liquid. After adjusting himself to the best state, Zhang Ruokan swallowed the marrow washing liquid in the first small jade bottle into his mouth, and with the help of the medicinal power of the marrow. It took half an hour for the 4th meridian to open up. The 4th meridian flows out of the chi pool, passes through the neck, chest, left arm, right arm, and then, along the spine of the back, rushes up to the head, and returns to the chi pool in the center of the eyebrows, completing a great week. Without any rest, Zhang Ruokan swallowed the marrow washing liquid in the second small jade bottle, and immediately began to open up the 5th meridian. The 5th meridian extends from the chi pool, passes through the chest cavity, abdominal cavity, passes through the left leg, the right leg, and returns to the chi pool. Route of this meridian was longer, and it took Zhang Ruokan a full 3 hours to most of the true chi in his body was consumed, and his whole body was covered with beads of sweat. Zhang Ruokan had to take out a spirit crystal, pinch it in his hand, quickly absorb the spiritual energy in the spirit crystal, transform it into true chi, and store it in the chi pool. The true chi in the chi pool is restored to a perfect state again. Zhang Ruokan immediately swallowed the marrow washing liquid in the 3rd small jade bottle and began to open up the 6th meridian. This meridian flows through the spleen, lungs, kidneys, liver, and heart, and belongs to the 5 organs of the human body. When the true chi flows through the 5 organs, it can strengthen the 5 organs. At the same time, the 5 organs are also the most fragile, and Zhang Ruokan must be carefully controlled. It took a full 6 hours, and the true chi in the body was almost completely exhausted, but the meridians still did not open up the whole body, and there was still a small gap between them. If the true chi is interrupted, then all efforts will be lost, and even the 5 internal organs will be traumatized. In the future, it will be 10 times more difficult to open up this meridian than it is now. Zhang Ruokan made a bold decision and put a qi-gathering pill into his mouth at an extremely fast speed. Boom! The Dan qi of the qi-gathering pill suddenly exploded in the body. Zhang Ruokan immediately devoted himself to 2 purposes, while using the 5 meridians that had been opened up to absorb Dan qi, which was continuously transformed into true qi and transported to the qi pool. On the other end, he carefully controlled his true chi and continued to impact the 6th meridian. This is a huge test of a person's spiritual power. Fortunately, Zhang Ruokan was a strong person in the great perfection of the heavenly extreme realm in his previous life, and his spiritual power was strong, and he succeeded in the case of single-mindedness and dual purpose. The sixth meridian has been opened successfully. The chi pool in the center of the eyebrows emitted a circle of white brilliance, and its capacity expanded tenfold again. In the middle of the yellow pole realm, the air pool was only the size of a water tank. Now, Zhang Ruokan's chi pool has become the size of 10 water tanks, which is very open, but it can hold a large amount of true chi. Finally broke through to the late stage of the yellow extreme realm. Zhang Ruokan pinched a spirit crystal in his hand, and the Shenwu mark in the center of his eyebrows emerged, and he began to absorb the spiritual energy in the spirit crystal continuously. The 6 meridians were all running, and the speed at which the Shenwu seal absorbed the aura was doubled. After stabilizing the realm, Zhang Ruokan stopped cultivating, opened his eyes, and his pupils became incomparably bright, almost like 2 bright cold 3 new meridians are opened, and a large number of impurities are discharged from the pores in the body, giving off a fishy odor. Zhang Ruokan walked out of the inner space of the space-time spar, and after taking a bath in the wooden barrel that had been prepared a long time ago, he put on his clothes, pushed the door and walked out. At this moment, it is already late at night. In the air, snowflakes like goose feathers fell one after another, and the entire courtyard was covered with a layer of silver frost. Yunar sat on the steps outside Zhang Ruokan's room, curled up, rubbing her hands from time to time, and breathing hot air into her palms. Squeak! Hearing the sound of the door opening behind her, Yunar immediately stood up, looked at Zhang Ruokan, who came out of it, and said happily, "Your Royal Highness the Ninth Prince, have you succeeded?" Zhang Ruokan was dressed in white, stood up straight, glanced at Yunar in slight surprise, nodded lightly, and said, "Success." It has broken through to the late stage of the yellow extreme realm. Sister Yunar, why don't you go to rest yet? When Yunar heard Zhang Ruokan's words, her whole person was stunned, her heart was beating wildly, and she was so excited that she felt like crying. That's great. It's wonderful. Yunar wiped her eyes and said, Yunar said that she would help His Royal Highness the Ninth Prince guard the gate, so she will definitely not leave. It's snowing. Don't freeze, you go to rest early. If you take this blood pill, you should be able to warm up a lot. Zhang Ruokan said. Yunar took the blood pill, held it tightly in her hand, nodded deeply, and walked towards residence, thinking in her heart that tonight, I'm afraid it will be a sleepless night. After sending Yunar back, Zhang Ruokan returned to the center of the snow-covered courtyard again. Still as a recumbent elephant, moving as a wild dragon. The dragon elephant is like a second palm, and the flying dragon is in the sky. Suddenly, Zhang Ruokan suddenly stepped to the ground, and countless snowflakes flew up his arms and legs were like a spinning turbine, rolling up countless snows. With the help of the kicking force of his legs, his body soared more than 7 meters high, and a low, pitched dragon groan came out of his mouth, and he struck a 1,000-pound boulder 10 zhang away with one palm. Boom! The 1,000-pound boulder immediately split apart, and the remnants flew in all directions, thick snow. Zhang Ruokan stood in the snow, staring at the broken boulder, with a little joy. Finally, the second palm of the dragon elephant Prajna palm has been successfully cultivated. Now, the power of the dragon elephant is comparable to that of a human, level mid-grade martial art. Not only the second palm, flying dragon in the sky, but also the first palm, wild elephant galloping to the earth, has reached the power of a human, level mid-grade martial art. If Zhang Ruokan cultivated to the third palm, then the power of the dragon elephant Prajna palm would be comparable to a human, level martial art. Every time you cultivate into one more palm, you will improve by 1 grade and become more sophisticated and subtle. The dragon elephant is like the first palm, and the elephant gallops to the ground. Zhang Ruokan stepped on his steps and rushed out. His body was like a galloping elephant, slapping his palm into the air, making a series of gas explosions. Countless snowflakes flew out by the force of the palm, and in the air, they melted into drops of ice water. Although the power of the first palm wild elephant galloping, is slightly weaker than that of the second palm. It has indeed reached the power of a human, level mid-grade martial art. The dragon is like a palm, it's really mysterious. Quote. With his current strength, not to mention the strength of a brute elephant, at least the power of a brute bull. In martial arts, this is known as the power of a bull. You must know that not every martial artist in the late stage of the yellow extreme realm can burst out with the power of a bull. Being able to burst out with the power of a bull is already at the upper middle level among the martial artists in the late stage of the yellow extreme realm. Zhang Ruochen had just cultivated to the late stage of the yellow extreme realm, and with the advantage of the 6 meridians in his body, coupled with the power of the dragon elephant Prajna Palm, he could already burst out with the power of a bull, which can be described as infinite potential. As his cultivation deepens and his physical body strengthens in the future, he will definitely be able to burst out with even more powerful power. After Zhang Ruochen cleaned up all the residual stones in the courtyard, he returned to the room, did not cultivate again, but lay on the bed, let himself completely relax, and fell into a deep sleep. After breaking through the late stage of the yellow pole realm, he can finally sleep peacefully. He thought it would take 3 months to reach this point. However, with the help of the time power of the space, time spirit crystal and a large number of cultivation resources, it only took half a month to reach this realm. Before the year-end assessment, he was confident to break through to a higher realm. After a night's rest, Zhang Ruochen's spirit became very full again, and his body was full of strength. Most of the qi gathering pill and body refining powder have been consumed, so go to the martial city to buy some more. After having breakfast with concubine Lin and Yuner, Zhang Ruochen left the palace alone and headed towards Wuxi. When I came to Dan City, I walked into a shop called Seigenkaku. This shop is located at a crossroads, and it is one of the top 3 shops in Dan City, and most of the martial artists who have passed by will come in to have a look, some to buy suitable pills, and some to sell the precious medicinal materials that have just been collected. An old man with a black mole on the corner of his mouth, at some point, walked behind Zhang Ruochen and asked with a smile, "This son, are you going to buy the qi gathering pill?" Zhang Ruochen was slightly startled, and turned to the old man to take a deep look. This old man is a little not simple, he can actually walk behind Zhang Ruochen silently. If he doesn't take the initiative to speak, Zhang Ruochen will find him hard. Definitely a martial arts master. The old man smiled and introduced himself. Old Decay, Mo Hanlin is the shopkeeper of this Dan shop. It turned out to be the shopkeeper, and his surname was Zhang. Zhang Ruochen nodded, and said, "I want to buy 50 qi gathering pills and 30 refining body scatters. I wonder if Qingshan Pavilion has enough stock." Mo Hanlin's heart was slightly shocked. Such a large order, only those big families would buy so many cultivation resources at one time. It is too rare for a single martial artist to buy so many pills. Qi gathering pill and body refining powder are not cheap things, and ordinary martial artists can't afford them at all. If young Master Zhang went to another house, maybe he really wouldn't be able to buy so many pills. What a coincidence, our Qingshan Pavilion happens to have a batch of qi gathering pills and body refining powder, which can definitely meet young Master Zhang's needs. Mo Hanlin took out an abacus, crackled and fiddled, smiled slightly at the corner of his mouth, and said, 50 qi gathering pills, 30 refining body scatter, the original price is 80,000 silver coins. However, young Master Zhang purchased such a large amount at one time, so there was naturally a certain discount. Well, you'll pay 72,000 silver coins. Zhang Ruochen said with a smile. Shopkeeper, you are really a refreshing person, I will buy the pills from you in the future. Zhang Ruochen didn't have many silver coins left on his body, which was not enough to pay such a huge sum, so he first went to Wuxi Chenjuang to withdraw 200,000 silver coins. 72,000 silver coins, plus the silver coins left before, made a total of 135,000 silver coins on his body. After completing this big deal, Mo Hanlin's face turned into a smile, and he said, "Young Master Zhang, I don't know, do you still buy anything else?" Zhang Ruokan said. What I want to buy, you definitely don't sell it here. Mo Hanlin said, could it be that young Master Zhang wants to buy a weapon that he can take advantage of? Zhang Ruokan. Yes, the manager looked a little higher, and said, charge, what a great eyesight. Mo Hanlin smiled and said, I have been a shopkeeper for decades, and I have seen not 10,000, but 8,000, and I have never seen a few people who do not wear weapons with them. So be it. We also have a branch in the Qi City, so I'll ask a guy to take you there. After a while, Mo Hanlin found a little fat man of 15 or 16 years old and said to him, Hanzi, immediately take this honorable young Master Zhang to the Qi market, and tell the proprietress that Gongzi Zhang is a distinguished guest of our Qingshan pavilion, and we must give Zhang Gongzi an appropriate discount in terms of price. The little fat man called Hanzi widened his eyes, shook his head vigorously, and said, Don't go. Don't go. I don't want to see the boss lady. The boss lady can seduce the soul of a man. When you see her, you are doomed. Mo Hanlin was angry and said in a rough voice, You are not a man, you can only be regarded as a half-grown boy at most now, what is there to be afraid of? All right. If you don't go, I won't give you the Qi gathering pill this month. Hanzi suddenly became anxious, and hurriedly said, Don't, I'll go. I can't go. Hanzi walked over to Zhang Ruokan and said respectfully, Young Master Zhang, please. Zhang Ruokan nodded, followed Hanzi, and walked towards the instrument market. Zhang Ruokan always felt that this shopkeeper of Qingshan Pavilion was a little weird, and he didn't seem to be an ordinary person. Of course, he was not worried that the other party had bad intentions. After all, there was an army guarding the city in Wu City, and the management was very strict, and no one dared to mess around in Wu City at all. Hanzi said in a low voice, Young Master Zhang, do you really want to go to the boss lady to buy weapons? The proprietress can seduce a man's soul. Young Master Zhang, are you a man? I'm just a boy, Zhang Ruokan said. Hanzi is white and chubby, with a pigtail on his head, 2 attractive ears, and eyes as small as soybeans. Zhang Ruokan was a little curious, and said, You said that the boss lady can seduce a man's soul, is the boss lady very beautiful? Hanzi nodded and said, The proprietress is naturally very beautiful, she is simply beautiful, sexy, enchanting. One eye stares at her, it makes people's little hearts flutter, and looking at her will make people blush and upset. But, what you don't know is that the proprietress has been married to 7 bosses. Married to 7 bosses? Zhang Ruokan was a little surprised. Hanzi said again, yes. All 7 bosses died, and all of them died in the cave room. Zhang Ruokan said, after the death of the 7 bosses, what will happen to their estate? Naturally, it's all the bosses. Even our shopkeeper is just working for the proprietress of the house. Hanzi said in a low voice. The proprietress is simply a lone star, the reincarnation of the soul envoy. The fox has become a spirit. It is difficult for any man to live for 3 days when he sees her. Luckily, we're both boys, so we shouldn't be seduced by her. Zhang Ruokan nodded and said, hopefully. In the Qi City, there is also a Qingshan Pavilion, which is built magnificently and gorgeously, and can be called a landmark building in the Qi City. Hanzi took out a palm-sized token from his pocket, flashed it to the guards guarding the Qingshan Pavilion, and walked towards the inner courtyard with Zhang Ruokan. In the inner courtyard, a maid walked into the pavilion full of white curtains, bowed down, and said, Chief Helmsman, Mo Hanlin has introduced a buyer, and he wants you to meet it in person. The woman was wearing a long red embroidered phoenix dress, sitting in the center of the pavilion. Her hair was in a high bun, 3 golden hairpins were inserted in her hair, she had a pair of bright beautiful eyes, crimson lips, and her skin that could be broken by blowing, and on her chest was a pair of full peaks. Although she was covered with a layer of tulle, she could still see the proud outline. Looks like 27 or 8, and there is a seductive style everywhere on his body. She is the proprietress of Qingshan Pavilion. Qinya's eyes turned up slightly, and she said with a smile, the buyer introduced by Mo Hanlin is an elder of a certain sect. Or is it the head of a family? Forget it. Today, I'm a little tired, and I'm gone. The maid shook her head and said, "No, just a boy who looks like he's only 16 or 17 years old." Huh. Qin Yasheng was a little surprised, and said, "Usually Mo Hanlin is quite reliable, how can he do such a foolish thing today?" The maid said, "Mo Hanlin never does foolish things, and the people he introduced are definitely not ordinary people." Qinya nodded, her eyes narrowed, and she smiled. "It really seems to be a very interesting thing. Suddenly I got tired of going to see what the boy was all about." Huh. Zhang Ruokan sat in the VIP room, holding a glass-carved teacup, looking very calm and waiting patiently. Hanzi also sat on a chair below with a big grin, drank tea in a big gulp, and even the tea was drunk into his mouth, and kept praising it, "Good tea." A moment later, footsteps could be heard outside. Then, Qinya and two maids walked in from outside. Hanzi immediately put down the teacup and jumped up from the chair, just like a mouse seeing a cat, respectfully saluted Qinya, and whispered, "Meet the boss lady." Qinya walked past Hanzi and glanced at Zhang Ruokan. I saw that the young man was still sitting there calmly, very calm, with a kind of maturity and stability that his peers should not have. At the same time, Zhang Ruokan also glanced at Qinya, looked at the other party, and felt a little amazed in his heart. It was really a charming and moving woman. If she tried to tempt men, I am afraid that 9 out of 10 men would be planted in her hands. Fortunately, Zhang Ruokan's mental power is strong, and he is not greatly affected by beauty, seduction, temptation, so he said straight to the point. "Boss, I believe you also know that I am here to buy a weapon and take me to your armory." Qinya walked towards Zhang Ruokan, and with every step, a pair of full peaks on her chest would tremble, which was simply turbulent and fragrant. She smiled brightly. "Young Master Zhang, what kind of weapon are you planning to buy? The slave family has to have a number in their hearts, right? Sword. It's best to be a true martial weapon, level sword." Zhang Ruokan smelled a faint charming fragrance, which was Qinya's body fragrance, which was particularly intoxicating. The scent is seductive and fantastical, but it's not vulgar. What a seductive enchantress. It was the first time Qinya had seen a man who could remain calm in front of her, and the other party was just a teenager. Isn't the heart of a teenager the weakest time? When you can't resist temptation the most? Zhang Ruokan's eyes were clear, without a trace of lewdness. "No wonder Mo Hanlin asked me to meet him in person. It's really amazing. How can an ordinary teenager have such a firm mental strength?" Qinya nodded, feeling that Zhang Ruokan was even more interesting, and said with a smile, "In the slave family's arsenal, there are indeed many, true martial treasure weapons level swords. Since young Master Zhang is a distinguished guest of the Qingshan Pavilion, the slave family will personally take young Master Zhang to the armory." The little fat man standing behind Qinya shook his head vigorously at Zhang Ruokan, and his eyes seemed to say, "Brother, don't go to the armory alone with the proprietress, she will eat you so much that you don't even have bones left." Zhang Ruokan naturally saw Hanzi's eyes, thoughtfully, and said, "Okay. Thank you to the hostess for leading the way. Please." Qinya's chest and hips were full, and her slender waist was like a willow branch. She walked in front of Zhang Ruokan, outlining graceful curves, her hips twisting, and her long hair swaying on her back like a black waterfall. With each step, the plump jade buttocks will gently tilt. Even if it's just a back, people can't take their eyes off it. No wonder Hanzi is so afraid of her. Such a woman, if she is docile, will definitely make men love it very much. However, if she is not docile, she will definitely make many men afraid. He was able to kill 7 prime ministers, and he held a huge amount of wealth in the martial arts. How can such a woman be meek? Zhang Ruokan tried his best to control his eyes and try not to fall on Qinya's body. "I've seen the boss." The 2 rows of guards guarding outside the gate of the armory immediately knelt down on one knee. Their eyes were fixed on the ground, their eyes did not squint, and they did not dare to look at Qinya more. All of them were genuinely terrified, as if the one standing before them was not a stunning beauty, but a seductive messenger. Only Qinya and Zhang Ruokan walked into the armory, and the others were all left outside. Seeing Zhang Ruokan follow Qinya into the deep door, Hanzi shook his head and sighed. He could already predict Zhang Ruokan's fate. None of the buyers who entered the armory alone with the proprietress were men, as long as they were men, and they were able to get out of the armory completely. Some had their hands cut off, some became eunuchs, some had their eyes gouged out, and some didn't even have their heads. It's not that the proprietress deliberately wants to hurt them, but those who can't control their hands and their lower bodies have to insult the proprietress if they can't control their lower bodies. In fact, every time the proprietress is the victim, she has to fight back and leave some lessons for the other party. It is precisely for this reason that those who were cut off by the proprietress with their hands, gouged out their eyeballs, and became eunuchs did not dare to speak out at all. For those of them who have heads and faces, once this matter is publicized, it will be too disgraceful. The armory of Qingshan Pavilion is very huge, divided into compartments. There are sword room, knife room, gun room, hammer, axe room. Among them, the sword room is the largest. In Yunwu County, the vast majority of warriors prefer to use swords as weapons. Weapons, divided into mortal weapons and true martial weapons. Every. It is a weapon used by ordinary people. The real martial weapon is a weapon used by the warrior. Only a martial artist can exert the true power of a true martial weapon. According to the grade of the materials used to refine the weapon, and the number of inscriptions in the true martial weapon, the true martial weapon can be divided into 9 orders. The first order true martial treasure has the lowest grade. The grade of the 9th order true martial weapon is the highest. As soon as Zhang Ruokan walked into the sword room, he felt a strange fluctuation, which emanated from a broken sword in the corner. The blade of the broken sword was a palm's width, and although the tip of the sword had been broken, the blade was still 4 feet long. The body of the sword looks unpretentious, and even the body of the sword has grains of rust. Shen Yuan. Seeing the broken sword, Zhang Ruokan was stunned for a moment, and immediately walked over quickly. Qinya said with a smile, "Young Master Zhang is really good eyesight. It is an ancient sword with a history of nearly 1,000 years, it is extremely heavy and extremely sharp. The material used to refine the sword is also very special, and no treasure connoisseur has been able to identify what metal it was made of. If it hadn't been damaged, it should have at least been a 7th order true martial weapon, or even higher. It's a pity. Such a good sword, but it was cut off, and even the inscriptions in the sword body were all broken. This sword, except for being sharp, has no other value. If young Master Zhang wants to buy it, the slave family will buy it for you at the price of a 1st order true martial weapon." "How much?" Zhang Ruokan slowly lifted the heavy broken sword, held it in his hand, and gently wiped off a layer of rust on the hilt, revealing the 2 ancient characters, Shen Yuan, under the rust. Shen Yuan ancient sword. Qinya saw that Zhang Ruokan seemed to like that broken sword very much, and couldn't help but regret a little in her heart. Even if the 1st order true martial arts weapon was expensive, it could only be sold for 500 silver coins, which was not as valuable as a qi gathering pill. 1,000 silver coins. She raised the price quite a bit. "Bought it," Zhang Ruokan said very simply. Not to mention 1,000 silver coins, even if it was 10 million silver coins, Zhang Ruokan would have to buy the Shen Yuan ancient sword. Because this ancient sword is the matching sword he used 800 years ago. Princess Kai Yao, now Empress Kai Yao, gave him a sword. When a man dies, so does the sword. Now that I'm alive again, it's time for the sword to be reborn. Shen Yuan, I will let you wash away the lead and regain your light." Zhang Ruokan stroked the Shen Yuan ancient sword, as if he was caressing his lover. His eyes were very confused. This is the fate of the sword and the man. Qinya was a little speechless. Is this person a man? Obviously, a living beauty stood in front of him, and he was still in the arsenal of a lonely man and a widow, but he was holding a broken sword. Could it be that a broken sword looks better than her? You know, if the other men had entered the armory with her alone, they would have already pounced on her. Although Qinya was very disgusted with those men, she directly took action to abolish their hands, gouge out their eyeballs, and cut off their life. However, it doesn't mean that she doesn't like men to be crazy because of her, and to become hungry ghosts because of her. She enjoyed the process of teasing men to the point of lust fire, and then, mercilessly, to make them sober and make them cry without tears. But now, Zhang Ruokan didn't even look at her. As long as it is a beautiful woman, it will definitely be very unwilling. Young Master Zhang, are you just going to buy this broken sword? Qinya walked over to Zhang Ruokan. Her plump and delicate body almost stood close to him, and her body exuded a charming fragrance. Zhang Ruokan gradually came back to his senses from the thoughts of his previous life, and as soon as he looked up, he saw a large area of snow-white skin on Qinya's chest. Although he was wearing clothes, he still looked extremely fragrant. Zhang Ruokan's eyes froze, suffocated slightly, his heart beat wildly, and he immediately pinched his fingertips, forcibly removed his gaze, and stared at the sword hanging on the wall. After settling down, Zhang Ruokan pointed to a royal blue war sword and said, "Boss lady, how many orders of true martial arts is this sword?" Qinya's eyes showed a little disappointment again, and said, "That's a fourth-order true martial weapon, called Soul Flashing Sword. There are 14 inscriptions engraved on the sword body, which are 4 Force inscriptions, 4 Ice inscriptions, 4 Electricity inscriptions, and 2 Light inscriptions. It can be said that it has a total of 3 special attributes, which are ice, electricity, and light. Generally speaking, there was only one inscription in the first-order true martial weapon. Only when the number of inscriptions reaches more than 10 can it be regarded as a fourth-order true martial weapon. The inscription in the true martial treasure weapon, each time it is added, the power will increase to varying degrees. Moreover, according to the different attributes of the inscription, the true martial. For example, a martial artist who opens the red flame divine martial seal has a flame aura in his body, and he can exert the stronger power of the true martial weapon by using the fire-based true martial weapon. How much? Zhang Ruokan asked. 30,000 silver coins. Qinya said. Good. Bought it. Zhang Ruokan held the Flash Soul Sword in one hand and the Shenyuan Ancient Sword in the other, and walked towards the outside of the armory as if he was fleeing. It was too dangerous to stay alone with this amorous proprietress, and Zhang Ruokan couldn't bear it anyway. He had already recovered the Shenyuan Ancient Sword, and he could just buy another true martial weapon level battle sword, which was completely enough for him to use at this stage. It's quite fast to escape. Hee, in the palm of my sister's hand, how can you escape? From now on, I'll have to play. Qinya showed a charming smile, and her interest in Zhang Ruokan became even stronger. When Zhang Ruokan and Qinya entered the armory, an elderly shopkeeper of the Qingshan Pavilion led a man and a woman to the outside of the armory. The identities of the man and the woman seemed to be very noble, and even the older shopkeeper bowed slightly in front of them, with a flattering smile. Man was Zhang Ruokan's starling, that is, the 8th prince of Yunwu County, Zhang. The woman who walked with Zhang Ji was one of the 4 young beauties of Yunwu County, the beloved daughter of the sect master of the Qian sect, Shan Shangling. Shan Shangling's temperament is outstanding. As sober and elegant as a lily, she looks 16 or 17 years old, her eyes are bright, her figure is delicate, and she will definitely become the most eye-catching one wherever she goes. The 8th prince said with a smile, "My mother has instructed me, and my junior sister has come to the royal city for the first time, so I must take care of it. Qingshan Pavilion is one of the largest shops in the martial city, and my sister has taken a fancy to any weapon, just tell me." Concubine Xiao, the mother of the 8th prince, was once a disciple of the Qian sect and the younger sister of the sect master of the Qian sect. Therefore, the 8th prince called Shan Shangling his junior sister. Shan Shangling smiled slightly and said, "Thank you, Your Royal Highness the 8th Prince." In fact, Shangling came to the royal city this time, mainly to meet those geniuses and heroes in the royal city, especially the first day of the Yunwu Zhengguo, His Royal Highness the Seventh Prince. Xiangling had heard of his name many times and admired him very much, and many female disciples of the Red Cloud sect admired him very much, but unfortunately it was difficult to even have a chance to see him once. The eighth prince said, "If the seventh brother is in the royal city, this prince can help you fulfill your wish. It's a pity, the junior sister came at the wrong time, and the seventh brother is not in the royal city." Shan Xiangling's eyes were a little disappointed, and she said, "I remember that the year-end assessment of the royal family is second only to the sacrificial ceremony. Isn't His Royal Highness the seventh prince coming back either?" The eighth prince said with a smile, "When the seventh brother was 10 years old, he was the first in the year-end assessment. What do you think is the value of participation in the year-end assessment for him? However, the year-end assessment is indeed a grand event, and only young disciples under the age of 20 from the royal family and various princes and nobles can participate, and the seventh brother may also come back. If the younger sister wants to attend this grand event, this prince will definitely get you a place to enter." "Then thank you again, His Royal Highness the eighth prince," Shan Xiangling said with a smile. When the eighth prince was talking to Shan Xiangling, the elderly shopkeeper walked up to Hanzi and said, "Hanzi, who went to the armory, why is the door of the armory closed?" Hanzi's expression was a little strange, and he whispered, "It's the boss lady and a young son." Hearing this, the elderly shopkeeper was also slightly startled, gasped, and said to himself, "The boss lady is actually. But don't kill anyone." The eighth prince and Shan Xiangling naturally heard about the conversation between the older shopkeeper and Hanzi. Shan Xiangling asked with some surprise, "Could it be that Qingshan Pavilion will still do things to kill people and seize wealth?" The eighth prince shook his head and said, "Not really. It's just that there are a lot of rumors about this proprietress, that it is said that the proprietress is very beautiful. As long as it is a man, she will definitely fall under her pomegranate skirt when she sees her. There are also rumors that the proprietress is ruthless and femme fatale, and many men have died at her hands. There are also rumors that the proprietress is actually very lascivious and has raised a lot of men. Moreover, she also likes to abuse men, many of whom have been cut off by her and gouged out their eyeballs. Of course, these are just rumors, and Prince Ben has not met the proprietress and does not know what kind of woman she is." After the eighth prince said this, Shan Xiangling didn't have much affection for that boss lady. In broad daylight, with a man, he entered the armory alone, and the door was closed, not wanting to guess what was going on. That proprietress was certainly not a good woman. The man who was brought into the armory by the proprietress also made people feel disgusting. Wow! The door of the armory was pushed open. Zhang Ruokan walked out of the gate quickly with 2 war swords, and when he saw the eighth prince standing in the distance, a little surprise immediately appeared on his face. The eighth prince was also slightly surprised when he saw Zhang Ruokan walking out of the door of the armory, and then his eyes became very cold. "Ninth brother, why are you also in Qingshan Pavilion? This is not the place for you." Hearing the eighth prince's name to Zhang Ruokan, Hanzi and the older shopkeeper were slightly surprised. This young master Zhang really came from a lot of background, and he was actually the son of the king of Yunwu County. At the same time, they also breathed a long sigh of relief, but fortunately the proprietress did not attack him. "If His Royal Highness the Ninth Prince has an accident in Qingshan Pavilion, I am afraid that Qingshan Pavilion will be closed tomorrow." Shan Xiangling also heard something about the 9 princes, and it is said that he is the only one among the 9 princes who cannot open the Shenwu seal. She didn't deliberately inquire about Zhang Ruokan, so she didn't know that Zhang Ruokan had opened the Shenwu mark half a month ago. How could such a waste prince come out of the armory? Don't. Thinking of the words of the 8th prince before, Shan Xiangling's eyes stared at Zhang Ruokan again, and there was a little more disdain in his eyes. Zhang Ruokan frowned slightly, looking quite displeased, and said, "Since you can come to Qingshan Pavilion, why can't I come?" The 8th prince sneered and said, "This prince came to Qingshan Pavilion to buy weapons, what are you doing here? Can you afford a true martial weapon level sword? Where did you get the 2 swords in your hand?" Zhang Ruokan felt inexplicable, and said unceremoniously, "You are too wide. My sword, even if it was picked up, doesn't seem to be your business. Stop." The eighth prince drank in a deep voice and said, "Your cultivation talent is poor, so stay in the palace honestly, don't come out and do something embarrassing, otherwise this prince will break your legs for your father." Zhang Ruokan became more and more unable to understand the words of the eighth prince, and said in a deep voice, "Do you have that ability?" Hearing this, the eighth prince was slightly stunned, and immediately laughed. His palms were clasped together, his 10 fingers moved, and he smiled, "Ninth brother. Today, Prince Ben will show you what it means to be competent." Zhang Ruokan stood tall, his eyes were calm, his 5 fingers were pinched together, and the true qi in his body was running in the 6 meridians. "If you want to fight, then fight." "Huh, His Royal Highness the 8th Prince, what is this for? This is the Qingshan Pavilion, not the Royal Palace. His Royal Highness the 9th Prince is a distinguished guest of the Qingshan Pavilion. If anyone dares to attack him in the Qingshan Pavilion, the slave family will be in charge." Qinya walked out of the armory with a charming smile on her cheeks. After the 8th Prince saw Qinya, he also showed a surprised look, and his heart fluttered slightly. If it weren't for Shan Shangling standing beside him, making his nerves tense all the time, and he didn't dare to do anything out of the ordinary, otherwise, when he saw a demon girl like Qinya, he would definitely not be able to be as calm as he is now. The 8th Prince left his gaze, stared at Zhang Ruokan coldly, and said, "HMPH. You've lost all the faces of the royal family." In the opinion of the 8th Prince, Zhang Ruokan couldn't afford to buy a true martial weapon-level battle sword at all. If he was able to get those 2 swords, he must have made the little white face of the proprietress of Qingshan Pavilion. Use your body to serve the proprietress of Qingshan Pavilion in exchange for resources to cultivate martial arts. In fact, Shan Shangling, who was standing on the side, had similar thoughts to the 8th Prince. He is also the son of the king of Yunwu County. Why can the 7th Prince become the supreme pride, but the 9th Prince is willing to become a plaything? One is a dragon in the clouds, and the other is a quagmire earthworm. Shan Shangling stared at Zhang Ruokan and shook her head lightly, sighing. Zhang Ruokan didn't know what the 8th Prince was talking about. He was sitting upright, too lazy to talk nonsense with him, holding 2 battle swords, and walking towards the outer courtyard of Qingshan Pavilion. Qinya has become a Jing, and seems to have seen some clues, and understands what the 8th Prince and Shan Shangling are thinking. Her eyes showed a hint of purity, and she called, "Your Royal Highness the 9th Prince, come often in the future. The slave family will definitely treat you well. If you want other cultivation resources, just come to the slave family." Zhang Ruokan took the Shen Yuan ancient sword, and the Flash Soul sword, to the front yard of the Qingshan Pavilion, paid 31,000 silver coins, and returned to the palace with 2 battle swords. Zi's side hall, in a courtyard full of snow. Zhang Ruokan was holding a 4-foot-long broken sword in his hand, and there was an inexplicable emotion in his heart. 800 years ago, the vicissitudes of life, the mountains and rivers changed. Things were not people, but I didn't expect that even the once extremely sharp Shenyuan ancient sword was broken. Even the broken Shenyuan ancient sword was very heavy, and if it weren't for Zhang Ruokan reaching the late stage of the yellow extreme realm, he might not be able to hold it. The inscriptions in the Shenyuan ancient sword are indeed all broken, and now, they are even sharper than other swords. If you want to reconnect the inscriptions in the sword body and restore the power of the Shenyuan ancient sword, you need at least a 5th grade refiner to do it. Is there a 5th grade refiner in Yunwu County? Zhang Ruokan put away the Shenyuan ancient sword. Even if this sword turns into a piece of scrap metal, he must take it with him. Because it can always remind itself to work hard to cultivate, only when it cultivates strong enough can it go to Empress Kai Yao for revenge. Zhang Ruokan took out the 4th order true martial weapon, Flash Soul sword, again, held the hilt of the sword, and pulled out the scabbard, revealing a royal blue crystal sword body. Zhang Ruokan mobilized the true qi in his body and poured it into the sword body of the soul flashing sword through his palm. In the Flash Soul Sword, the first inscription was urged by the true Qi and came back to life. It's a force inscription. Once it is activated by true Qi, it can increase the weight of the Flash Sword by 100 catties. The original weight of the Flash Soul Sword was only 53 catties, and the first force system was revived, and the weight of the sword body directly reached 153 catties. The weight skyrocketed. Zhang Ruokan's arm trembled slightly, and he had to stabilize his gesture again. Zhang. A sword stabbed out. However, the movement of the sword is not precise and quite difficult to control. With Zhang Ruokan's current cultivation, he can indeed burst out with the power of a brute bull by casting the dragon elephant like a palm. You can even lift a 300-pound stone plate and throw it 10 meters away. However, it was all an explosion of power in an instant. If it is changed to a 300-pound war sword, with Zhang Ruokan's current cultivation, it is not easy to lift the battle sword flat, let alone display exquisite sword skills. With Zhang Ruokan's current cultivation, wielding a sword weighing 153 pounds is already the limit of what he can bear. Thorn. Slash. After a whole afternoon of cultivation, Zhang Ruokan initially adapted to the weight of the soul flashing sword. Of course, it's just a preliminary adaptation. Those kendo masters can easily stab mosquitoes within 3 zhang with their swords, and control the sword extremely exquisitely, reaching the realm of, the sword goes with your heart. Zhang Ruokan is still far from that step, and compared to those kendo masters, he still seems too clumsy. The sword, it's too heavy. There are a total of 4 force system inscriptions in the Flash Soul Sword, and just by inspiring the first force system inscription, the weight of the Flash Soul Sword reaches 153 catties. If the second inscription is activated, how much will the Flash Sword become? Zhang Ruokan mobilized the true Qi in his body and continued to infuse the second force system inscription. However, the thinner the true Qi in the body turned out, the second force system inscription did not change in the slightest, and there was no sign of recovery at all. Zhang Ruokan had to give up. With the amount of true Qi in my body now, I can't activate the second inscription at all, and my cultivation is still not strong enough. Zhang Ruokan withdrew the true Qi injected into the sword body, and the Flash Soul Sword immediately became only 53 catties in weight again. Adapted to the weight of 153 catties, and the 53 catties of the Flash Soul Sword gave Zhang Ruokan a feeling of lightness. Then, Zhang Ruokan injected his true Qi into the soul flashing sword, activating an ice inscription. The soul flashing sword immediately emitted a biting chill, which made Zhang Ruokan's 5 fingers a little numb. Wow! Zhang Ruokan swung out with a sword, and the blade of the Flash Soul Sword immediately appeared with crystalline snowflakes. It was a tiny droplet of water in the air, frozen into frost particles by the sword Qi. Electrical inscription. Light inscription. Zhang Ruokan tried to activate an electric inscription in a light inscription. After the electrical inscription is activated, tiny wires appear on the surface of the sword. The sword stabbed out, and it was like a bolt of lightning that broke through the air and flew out, making a pop explosion. After the light inscription was activated, the Flash Soul Sword was immediately wrapped in a layer of white light mist, becoming extremely sharp. White light flashed, and the stone immediately cracked. With the amount of true Qi in Zhang Ruokan's body now, he could only support an inscription. If you use the power of the power system inscription, you cannot use the power of the other 3 series of inscriptions. If you want to activate 2 inscriptions at the same time, you must work hard to cultivate and improve your cultivation. These 30,000 silver coins are well spent. Zhang Ruokan withdrew the soul flashing sword back into its scabbard. There are a total of 14 inscriptions in the Flash Soul Sword, and if all 14 inscriptions are activated, the power of the 4th order true martial weapon will be fully revealed. I have to step up my cultivation. Entering the inner space of the space-time crystal, Zhang Ruokan immediately subdued a Qi gathering pill and began to cultivate. Boom! The Qi gathering pill exploded in his body and turned into a huge ball of Dan Qi. The 6 meridians immediately began to transport the Dan Qi, which was converted into true Qi and stored in the Qi pool. It took Zhang Ruokan more than half a day to absorb all the Dan Qi in his body and refine it. Among them, only the 5 layers of Dan Qi were absorbed and transformed into true Qi. The other 5 layers of Dan Qi escaped from the pores and were all wasted. If it were another martial artist, he would definitely be very distressed. After all, wasting 50% of Dan Qi is equivalent to wasting 500 silver coins. Zhang Ruokan didn't feel wasted, but felt that the true Qi in his body had increased a lot. If it is a gradual cultivation, it will take more than 10 days to achieve the current effect. It only took half a day to take the Qi gathering pill. District. What is 1,000 silver coins? If the credits are gone, you can earn them again. Time is wasted, and you can't earn it back. In the following days, Zhang Ruokan spent most of his time cultivating in the space-time crystal. Use the Qi gathering pill to increase the amount of true Qi in your body. Use the body refining powder to refine the body. In addition to this, he would also spend a lot of time cultivating the dragon elephant prajnapam and the heavenly heart sword technique. In the first month of cultivation in the space-time crystal, the amount of true Qi in Zhang Ruokan's Qi pool increased by 5 times. In the second month of cultivation in the space-time crystal, Zhang Ruokan could burst out with the power of 2 bulls. In the third month of cultivation in the space-time crystal, the amount of true Qi in Zhang Ruokan's Qi pool reached 10 times that of the late stage of the yellow extreme realm. The cultivation of the true Qi in the Qi pool was complete, reaching the limit of the late stage of the yellow extreme realm. At this time, Zhang Ruokan could completely start to open up new meridians and impact the small pole of the yellow pole realm. However, Zhang Ruokan did not do this, but suppressed his cultivation and continued to use the body refining powder to refine his body. With my current physique, if I want to hit the small pole of the yellow pole realm, I must open up 4 more meridians. In other words, I am in the small pole of the yellow extreme realm, and there are a total of 10 meridians in my body. You must know that a martial artist who cultivates human-level lower-grade exercises can only open up a total of 7 meridians in his body, and even if he cultivates to the great perfection of the yellow extreme realm, the number of meridians in his body is still 7. Being able to open up 10 meridians in a small pole is definitely a top genius. However, Zhang Ruokan felt that it was far from enough. You must know that in his last life, when he was in the small pole of the yellow pole realm, he opened up a total of 13 meridians. Although my current physique cannot be compared to the previous life, I firmly believe that as long as I work hard to refine my physical body, it will not be difficult to open up 11 meridians at the small pole of the yellow extreme realm. Zhang Ruokan's biggest advantage in this life is that he has a space-time spar, and his cultivation time is 3 times that of others. Since there is twice as much time, it is natural to make reasonable use of it, work hard to improve yourself, and even do better than the previous life. In the 4th month of cultivation in the space-time crystal, Zhang Ruokan's physique has undergone earth-shaking changes, and he can burst out with a 3-bull power by casting the dragon elephant Panruo fist. In the 6th month of cultivation in the space-time crystal, Zhang Ruokan's strength rose again, and he could burst out with the power of the 4 bulls. Reaching this point, Zhang Ruokan finally felt that his physique had a bottleneck, reaching the limit of his physical body, and it was extremely difficult to improve his strength. Even if you cultivate for another year, you won't be able to improve to the power of the 5 bulls. After cultivating in the space-time spirit crystal for half a year, 2 months have passed in the outside world. Being able to cultivate the strength of a brute bull is considered a mid to upper class powerhouse in the late stage of the yellow extreme realm. Only a martial artist in the yellow extreme realm can cultivate the power of the 4 bulls. I'm still a cultivator in the late stage of the yellow pole realm, but I have already cultivated the power of the 4 bulls, which is enough to compete with ordinary yellow pole realm small pole martial artists. If I break through to the yellow pole realm, what kind of powerful power can I burst out? Now, my physical strength has reached the limit of this stage, and I can start to attack the small pole of the yellow extreme realm. I don't know how many meridians can be opened. As a precaution, Zhang Ruokan took out a total of 6 small jade bottles containing the Mara washing liquid and placed them neatly in front of him. Go for it. In the same realm, the more meridians that are opened up, the stronger the physique and combat power will be. Fight it. Zhang Ruokan grabbed the first small jade bottle, swallowed the marrow washing liquid into his abdomen, and immediately began to open up the seventh meridian. With Zhang Ruokan's current physique and abundant true qi in his body, it was easy to open up the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th meridians. It only took 1 day to successfully open up the 5 meridians and run through the whole body, forming a 5-day cycle. However, when he began to open the 11th meridian, he finally felt a little struggling. It took him a full 6 hours to successfully open up the 11th meridian, and the whole person was so tired that he collapsed. His whole body was soaked with beads of sweat, and the true qi in his body was consumed by nearly 90%. When the 11th meridian was successfully opened, Zhang Ruokan's body trembled slightly. At the center of his eyebrows, a muffled sound sounded. Boom. Reach the yellow pole realm small pole position. The capacity of the air pond immediately expanded tenfold, and it became a full 5 meters square, not much different from the size of a real pond. In the gas pool, the true qi surged, and it was full of mist. Sure enough, this body is still too weak, and it can only open up 11 meridians in the small pole of the yellow extreme realm, so I must find a way to strengthen my physique. If other martial artists knew Zhang Ruokan's thoughts at the moment, they would have to cry and faint in the martial arts training ground. You must know that if you can open up 6 meridians at the small pole of the yellow pole realm, you can already be called a genius. If you can open up 8 meridians, you are a top genius. Opened up 10 meridians, it was like a demon, so that martial artists in the same realm could only look up. The 7th prince opened up 10 meridians in the small pole of the yellow pole realm, so that he was famous all over the world, invincible in the same realm, and was named the first day of the Yunwu County Kingdom, completely suppressing the light of other geniuses. In the past 100 years, in the entire Yunwu County country, he is the only one who has opened up 10 meridians in the small pole of the yellow extreme realm, and there is no second person. Of course, now there is one more Zhang Ruokan. Anyway, I finally reached the yellow pole realm small pole level. I wonder how powerful I am now. Zhang Ruokan cleaned the dirt off his body, changed into a blue robe, and walked out of the room. He plans to find a place where no one is there and test his strength. The royal palace of Yunwu County is built around the mountain, and the 3 mountains are wrapped in the palace wall, which are Jun Mountain, Wang Mountain, and Tianzi Mountain. In addition to the dense palace-like buildings, there are also some more secluded gardens and mountain docks. Zhang Ruokan and concubine Lin live in the Zi Partial Palace, which is equivalent to the Cold Palace, which is far away from the main palace complex. Walking out of the Zi side hall, it is a dense forest full of snow. Continuing forward, there is one of the 3 mountains in the palace, Jun Mountain. When I came to the bottom of Jun Mountain, I couldn't see the endless stream of palace maids and eunuchs, and even the guards could hardly see it. Here it is. Zhang Ruokan stopped, ready to test his current strength. His legs were slightly bent, like a horse's step, and like a giant elephant standing proudly in the snow. With his legs stepping on his feet, he kept making palm prints, and the speed became faster and faster. The dragon elephant is like the first palm, and the elephant gallops to the ground. Zhang Ruokan's legs kicked, the bones and muscles of his whole body were completely tensed, and then he suddenly shot out and slammed his palm on the stone wall. Bang! On the stone wall, cracks are opened, and the gaps are constantly expanding. The 5-meter-high stone wall collapsed with a bang. Zhang Ruokan stepped on his steps and quickly retreated backwards to avoid being hit by the collapsed rubble. The explosive power of this palm is almost equivalent to the power of 8 bulls. Zhang Ruokan nodded lightly. An ordinary yellow pole realm small pole martial artist can only burst out with the power of 4 bulls. He had just broken through the small pole of the yellow pole realm, and he was able to burst out with the power of the 8 bulls, which was already quite good. As the cultivation deepens, the power that can burst out will definitely become stronger. Let's try my swordsmanship again. Zhang Ruokan took out the Flash Soul Sword from the inner space of the space-time crystal, held it in his hand, and injected true qi into the sword body. Wow! The first Force System inscription was activated, and the weight of the Flash Soul Sword immediately reached 153 catties. Subsequently, the second Ice inscription was also activated, and a piercing cold aura emanated from the sword body, making the surrounding air slightly colder. With Zhang Ruokan's current cultivation, activating 2 inscriptions at the same time is already the limit. In the past 6 months, Zhang Ruokan has not been completely refining his body, and a lot of time has actually been spent on cultivating the Tianqin sword technique and the Dragon Elephant Prajna Palm. Exercises, body refining, and martial arts are all indispensable. Tianqin swordsmanship, the swordsmanship of the lower grade of the spirit level, the whole set of swordsmanship is divided into 12 moves. Each sword technique is extremely exquisite, containing a variety of variations, far from being comparable to human-level swordsmanship. If a martial artist in the yellow extreme realm wants to successfully cultivate the Tianqin sword technique, it will definitely take a lot of time. Even if it was to cultivate one of the sword techniques, it would take months of hard work to do it. Zhang Ruokan relied on the memory of having practiced the Tianqin sword technique, and it took half a year to successfully cultivate 3 of the sword techniques. The 153-pound Flash Soul Sword, in Zhang Ruokan's hands, seemed to have no weight, and it was very skillful to use, as if it had become a part of the body. As soon as the arm moved, the sword had already moved first. Heavenly Heart shows the way. Zhang Ruokan's right arm was raised, and a sword was swung out. In the air, there was an ear-piercing sound of breaking wind immediately, and a sword chi flew out. Wow! On the ground, a 7-meter-long, 3-foot-deep ice sword mark was left. Where the sword marks passed, the blades of grass were broken, the stones were cracked, and a neat cut was left in the ground. It's like a sword road. Heavenly Heart broken plum. Zhang Ruokan's arm shook and stabbed out with a sword. The flash sword turned into a blue shuttle of light, and 7 phantoms appeared, as if 7 swords were stabbing out at the same time. Thorns in the stone wall. When it was up, the tips of the 7 sword shadows converged at one point, making a ding sound on the stone wall. 7 tiny sword holes were left, all of which were pierced with the tips of the swords. 7 sword holes, arranged in the shape of a plum blossom. Tianqin broken plum. It is not the plum of the plum blossom that is broken, but the eyebrows of the eyebrows. A sword stabbed out, leaving 7 tiny sword holes in the center of the opponent's eyebrows, like a blood-colored plum blossom imprinted on the center of the opponent's eyebrows. Only by cultivating the sword intent to the realm where the sword goes with the heart can this move be successfully cultivated. The realm of sword intent is divided into threefold. The sword goes with the heart, the sword heart is clear, and the human sword is one. Zhang Ruokan is now in the realm where the sword walks with his heart, even if he is not far from the sword heart. In addition to the 2 swordsmanship of Tianqin guiding the way, and Tianqin breaking plum, Zhang Ruokan also successfully cultivated a defensive swordsmanship, Tianqin sword bell. Heavenly Heart sword bell. Zhang Ruokan continuously injected the true qi in his body into the soul-flashing sword, and as soon as the horizontal sword blocked, the sword qi immediately condensed into the phantom of a light blue bell. The phantom of the big bell rotated rapidly, wrapping Zhang Ruokan's body inside the sword bell. Once this sword trick is cast, it is enough to block the full force of the martial artist of the yellow extreme realm. Unless that yellow extreme realm great pole martial artist also cultivated a spirit-level sword technique, he could break through Zhang Ruokan's defensive sword technique. Tianqin shows the way. Tianqin breaks plum. Tianqin sword bell. Zhang Ruokan continued to perform 3 swordsmanship techniques to comprehend the sword intent realm of sword heart clearing. Of course, if you want to achieve Kenshin enlightenment, you can't do it overnight. It wasn't until the true qi in his body was exhausted that Zhang Ruokan returned to the Zhi side hall. There are still 13 days, which is the year-end assessment, and I will strive to improve my cultivation a little more. Zhang Ruokan sat in the secret book of time and space, put a qi-gathering pill into his mouth, and cultivated with all his might. The time for the year-end assessment is getting closer and closer, and the princes and county lords of Yunwu County are all in full swing of cultivation, wanting to make a splash and shine during the year-end assessment. At the end of the year, only the descendants of the royal family and relatives under the age of 20 can participate, so as to increase the motivation of young people and enhance their mutual competitiveness. In previous years, Zhang Ruokan didn't even have the opportunity to participate in the year-end assessment, so he could only stand under the stage and watch. At this time, it was the most embarrassing time for him and concubine Lin. This year, it may be different. While Zhang Ruokan was working hard to improve, other princes and county lords were also improving. In the Yushu Palace, where Zhang Ruokan and concubine Lin once lived, in a gorgeous room, there was a loud laugh from the 8th Prince Zhang Ji. Ha ha. Finally broke through the small pole of the yellow pole realm. Concubine Xiao's face showed a hint of relief, and she exclaimed, "Good. Jir, with your current cultivation, although it can't be compared with the 5th and 6th princes, at least your father can see your progress, and there will definitely be a reward when the time comes." The 8th prince nodded. With his own cultivation, he was indeed far from the 5th and 6th princes. When the 6th prince was assessed at the end of last year, he was at the peak of the small pole of the yellow pole realm, and now he is likely to have reached the middle pole level. As for the 5th prince, it is even more powerful. It is said that they have broken through to the Great Pole. The 8th prince smiled coldly and said, "Anyway, there is already someone at the bottom, and when the time comes, his presence will only make me even better." You're talking about the 9 princes. Isn't it not long since he opened up the martial arts mark, and it is estimated that he has not even completed the Mara washing and pulse, so he should not participate in the year-end assessment. Concubine Xiao said, Hey, it is not up to him to participate or not." The corners of the 8th prince's mouth hooked slightly, and a sneer of disdain appeared on his face. The Lin family, the martial arts field. Heavenly Heart shows the way. Lin Lucian's 5 fingers pinched a starlight sword, and with a swing of the sword, a sword chi immediately formed in the air, leaving a 7-meter-long sword path on the ground. On the hard stone slab, a deep sword crack was formed. Bang! Lin Fengxian clapped his hands, walked into the martial arts arena, and said with a smile, "Shanur, your talent in kendo is really amazing for your father. It only took less than 3 months to successfully cultivate a spirit-level low-grade swordsmanship. With this sword technique, he will definitely be invincible in the year-end assessment and become the most dazzling one." Lin Lucian said, "That's also because I have long cultivated to the realm of sword goes with your heart, and have a deep understanding of the way of the sword, so I can successfully cultivate this sword technique in such a short period of time." Lin Fengxian nodded and said, "In the entire royal city, before the age of 20, there are definitely less than 10 young geniuses who can cultivate the sword intent to the realm of sword walking. You are only 15 years old now, and there is no limit to what you can achieve in the future." Lin Feng left the martial arts training ground first, and Lin Qishan continued to practice swordsmanship. 13 days passed quickly. The 13 days in the outside world, in the space-time spar, are 39 days. With the help of the Qi-gathering pill, Zhang Ruokan finally reached the peak of the small pole of the yellow pole realm from the early stage of the yellow pole realm. The amount of true Qi in the Qi pool was 10 times that of the 13 days ago, and the cultivation was completed again. Now he punches out casually, which is the power of 10 bulls. If you use the Dragon Elephant Fist, with the help of the increase in martial arts, you can even burst out with the power of the 16 bulls. Ordinary small pole martial artists can burst out with the power of the 4 bulls. A mid-pole martial artist can burst out with the power of 9 bulls. The great pole rank martial artist can burst out with the power of the 16 bulls. In other words, although Zhang Ruokan is only a cultivator at the peak of the small pole position, he can burst out with the power to compete with the great pole martial artists. Zhang Ruokan didn't hit the middle pole position, because, even if he reached the middle pole position now, he could only open up 16 meridians in his body at most. You must know that when he was in the middle pole in his last life, he opened up 20 meridians. You have to find a way to improve your physique. If you lose at the starting line, what will you do to compete with Empress Kai Yao in the future? Zhang Ruokan walked out of the room and saw Yuner standing outside the door. Sister Yunar, today is the time for the year-end assessment. Zhang Ruokan said. That's right. Yunar nodded, looking a little nervous, and said, Your Royal Highness the Ninth Prince, you have to be careful. It is said that the Eighth Prince has broken through to the Yellow Extreme Realm small pole position. If he knew that you were also a martial artist now, he would definitely deliberately fight against you. It's okay. It's not a big deal. Zhang Ruokan smiled faintly and asked, Today, my mother will also go to watch the year-end assessment, right? Concubine Lin is definitely going to go, but she doesn't know that you are going to participate in the year-end assessment. Yunar secretly thought in her heart that if Concubine Lin knew that His Royal Highness the Ninth Prince had become a martial artist, she would definitely be quite happy. Your Royal Highness the Ninth Prince, Yunar will help you change into the Imperial Python robe, and you can go to the Royal Martial Arts Field in Wang Mountain now. Yunar said. At this time, Zhang Ruokan saw the copper tray that Yunar held in his hand, and a set of golden robes embroidered with a four-clawed python were neatly stacked on the plate, with a hair crown, a jade belt, and golden boots. In Yunwu County, only the prince can wear the imperial python robe, and the county lord wears the royal bird robe. After the last 3 months of cultivation and body refining, Zhang Ruokan's body shape and temperament have already undergone earth-shaking changes, and he is no longer as weak and sick as he used to be, but gives people a youthful heroic spirit. Wearing the imperial python robe and wearing the hair crown, the temperament of the whole person has changed again. It is just like a carp jumping over the dragon gate, wrinkling the eagle and turning into a kunpeng, giving people a feeling of indescribable preciousness. Your Royal Highness the Ninth Prince, you really are more like a prince than any prince. Yunar stared at Zhang Ruokan's heart beating, and couldn't help but be attracted by the temperament exuded by Zhang Ruokan's body, and 2 blushes appeared on her cheeks. Zhang Ruokan smiled and said, Sister Yunar, let's go to the Royal Martial Arts Field. Yunar nodded lightly and said, Concubine Lin has already rushed to greet the king first, and we will hurry over, lest it be too late, and those concubines and princes will chew the root of their tongues again. The Royal Martial Arts Field was built under the King Mountain. The year-end assessment is second only to the sacrificial ceremony of the royal family, and even the king of Yunwu County stopped retreat and personally participated in the year-end assessment. The prince, the county lord, and the concubine, when the sky was not yet bright, rushed to the Royal Martial Arts Field and waited for the arrival of the king of Yunwu County. King Yunwu sat in the highest position in the martial arts, looking like he was in his 40s, with 2 neat beards, exuding an aura of not being angry and arrogant. He glanced at the princes and county lords, and said with a smile, Here, didn't you come back? The queen sat next to the king of Yunwu County and said, My lord, half a month ago, the 7th prince sent someone to send back a letter, because he encountered an important matter, and he could not come back for the time being. Besides, with the martial arts cultivation of the 7th prince, there is no point in participating in the year-end assessment. King Yunwu was a little disappointed, and said, Here can't participate in the year-end assessment, so this year will inevitably have a lot less expectations. Concubine Xiao, the biological mother of the 8th prince, took a step forward and said, Great king, the 7th prince can't participate in the year-end assessment, but the 9th prince can't participate this year. Oh, Jor. King Yunwu's gaze stared at Concubine Lin. Concubine Xiao smiled. 3 months ago, the 9th prince opened the divine martial seal. Really? Ha ha. Concubine Lin, why didn't you tell this king such good news in the first place? King Yunwu was in a good mood. After all, the 9th prince is also his biological son, and the only prince who has not opened the Shenwu seal. The 9 princes, all of whom opened the Shenwu seal, the king of Yunwu County was naturally very happy. Concubine Lin bit her lip lightly and said in a low voice, The 9th prince has just opened the divine martial seal, so he doesn't dare to alarm the king. King Yunwu Jun said, As long as Jor can open the divine martial seal, it will be a matter worth celebrating. Even if his future achievements are limited, he is still a martial artist who is stronger than ordinary people after all. Where is Jor? And not let him come out to the king. The eighth prince smiled coldly. Everyone has arrived, but the ninth brother has not come for a long time. Hey, it's different to open the Shenwu seal, it's so big. At this moment, Zhang Ruokan wore an imperial python robe, walked up from the bottom of the high stone steps, and said, Starling, is it really good for you to speak ill of people behind your back like this? Zhang Ruokan looked magnificent, walked in front of the eighth prince, and stared at him with sharp eyes. The eighth prince clenched his fists and looked very angry. How could Zhang Ruokan dare to speak to him in such a tone before? What a lawlessness! Zhang Ruokan shook his sleeves, walked forward, glanced at the king of Yunwu County who was sitting above, bowed his hand, and said, Meet the king. Hearing Zhang Ruokan's title to the king of Yunwu County, everyone present was shocked. Suddenly, the atmosphere became a little solemn, everyone held their breath, and the atmosphere did not dare to come out. King Yunwu stared at Zhang Ruokan below and said, You call me, king. The queen snorted coldly and said, Ninth prince, you are so bold, do you want to deny your father? Boom. Concubine Lin was frightened, immediately knelt on the ground, and hurriedly explained, King, Chenur must have been negligent for a while, so she will make a mistake. I'm not wrong. Zhang Ruokan stood tall, his body stood straight, his eyes were like torches staring at the king of Yunwu County, and he said, A father will be able to teach his son. May I ask you, my lord, I have been frail and sickly since I was a child, as a father, what have you taught me? What did you help me? Did you care about me? A man must have kindness, affection, and morality. May I ask you, my lord, when my mother was reprimanded by the queen, did you have affection for her? In the past 3 years, my mother has been bullied, what is your kindness to her? My mother and I were kicked out of our place of residence in the middle of the night in the cold winter and forced to move to a side hall, as if we were beaten into a cold palace. Since you can't be a father or a husband, dare to ask, is it wrong for me to call me a king? It was the first time that someone dared to speak to King Yunwu in such a tone, and a large number of people were already kneeling in fright. The palace maids and eunuchs knelt on the ground, all trembling. At this moment, King Yunwu's face was very cold, he glanced at the queen sitting next to him, and said in a deep voice, Who gave the order? Who drove them to the side temple? The queen still sat there calmly, her eyes glaring coldly at the eighth prince and concubine Xiao. Boom, boom. The eighth prince and concubine Xiao immediately knelt on the ground, their bodies were weak, and cold sweat kept coming out of their foreheads. Yes, it's a minister. Concubine. Concubine Xiao's voice trembled a little. Although it was an order from the queen, how could concubine Xiao dare to confess to the queen? King Yunwu snorted coldly and said, Are you alone? Concubine Xiao glanced at the eighth prince next to her, clenched her teeth, and said, Only the concubine is alone. All right. Since you want to take on the responsibility alone, then in the future, you will go to live alone in the Zi Side Hall. Yunwu County King Road. Hearing this, concubine Xiao knew that she was really beaten into the cold palace, and it would be difficult to have a chance to turn over in the future, so she went soft and fainted directly. After concubine Xiao was carried down, King Yunwu stood up from his seat, looked at Zhang Ruokan and said, It seems that you have completed the Mara washing and become a real martial artist, and you have indeed become different from before. Good. For your rare blood, today, this king will make an exception to forgive you once. Do you want to take the year-end exam? Zhang Ruokan's eyes had a firm look, and he said neither humbly nor arrogantly, Of course I want to participate. Good. Ha ha. He is worthy of being the heir of this king, and there is a kind. The king of Yunwu County laughed loudly. This is a world where martial arts are respected, and what a real strong man wants is 3 breaths, 1 hard breath, 1 backbone, and 1 arrogant breath. If Zhang Ruokan behaved in cringe today, afraid of this and that, even if he opened the Shenwu seal, the king of Yunwu County would not appreciate him. The eighth prince, who was kneeling on the ground, pinched his 5 fingers tightly, stared at Zhang Ruokan with vicious eyes, and secretly said in his heart, Zhang Ruokan, you can be proud now. In the martial arts field of the year-end assessment, I must trample you under my feet, so that you can clearly understand who is the real strong. Seeing that the king of Yunwu County did not punish Zhang Ruokan, but instead punished concubine Xiao, concubine Lin breathed a long sigh of relief and immediately pulled Zhang Ruokan aside. Concubine Lin still couldn't believe what had just happened, and said, "Chenur, have you really become a real martial artist?" "Yes." Zhang Ruokan nodded and no longer hidden. "You've just become a martial artist, so you're going to take the year-end assessment. What if you encounter danger?" Concubine Lin was a little worried. Zhang Ruokan said, "Even if you don't do anything, won't you encounter danger?" "Mother, don't worry, I will do my best and do what I can. Only young martial artists under the age of 20 can participate in the year-end assessment." King Yunwu had a total of 9 sons and 13 daughters. The 5th prince, the 6th prince, the 7th prince, the 8th prince, and the 9th prince are all under the age of 20, except for the 7th prince who is not in the royal city. The other 4 princes will all participate in the assessment. In addition to the direct princes and county lords, the families of those princes and relatives will each select 3 of the best young warriors to participate in the year-end assessment. For example, the Lin family. Those royal relatives have already rushed to gather on the periphery of the royal family's martial arts field, forming camps one after another. In the royal city, some important big figures, such as the martial arts powerhouses of the Earth Extreme Realm, the sect masters of the sects, and the heads of large families, also received invitations and came to the royal martial arts field to watch the ceremony. Boss, in previous years, invitations from the royal family were also sent to Qingshan Pavilion, but you have never been there. How are you going to go to the ceremony this year? Mo Hanlin followed behind Qinya and asked, a little puzzled. Although it was a cold winter, Qinya was wearing a crimson long dress, revealing 2 snow-white jade arms and sexy, sensual collarbones, as if she couldn't feel the cold. Qinya's eyes had a bit of a charming smile in her eyes. Her lips were rosy and crystalline, and she said, "When you meet someone you are interested in, you naturally want to know more about him." The proprietress is talking about the 9 princes. Mohan Grove Road. Huh. Is there anyone else but him? Qinya said with a smile. 2 months ago, after Zhang Ruokan went to Qingshan Pavilion, Qinya sent someone to check on him. What surprised Qinya was that that determined young man had not opened the divine martial mark in the previous 16 years, and was just an ordinary person. Moreover, he is still frail and sickly, and he is bedridden all the year round. She also found out Zhang Ruokan's miserable situation in the palace, the grievances between concubine Lin and the Lin family, and so on. However, such a young man actually spent 100,000 silver coins to buy a large number of pills and 2 true martial arts treasures from Qingshan Pavilion. Where did he get the huge amount of silver? What secrets are there about him? In Qinya's opinion, the 9th prince, who was despised by everyone, was simply fascinated all over his body, which made her unable to figure it out. Driven by curiosity, she planned to go to the year-end assessment in person, wanting to see how many secrets Zhang Ruokan still hid in his body. Boss lady, you actually came to the Royal Martial Arts Arena too. It was unexpected. Lin Fengxian saw Qinya wearing a crimson dress from a distance, and took the initiative to greet the other party. In Lin Fengxian's eyes, Qinya is also a very mysterious woman. He had only seen Qinya once from afar, and he was not familiar with it. However, he knew that the other party had huge financial resources, which were enough to affect the economic operation of the entire royal city, and he was definitely not a fairly simple woman. It is said that in Wu City, 5 out of 10 shopkeepers are helping her with things. It's just that the proprietress has always been a dragon without seeing the tail, and it is quite difficult for even the head of a big family to see her. If you can make friends with her, for the Lin family, there will only be benefits, no harm. Qinya glanced at Lin Fengxian, her eyes lifted slightly, and said, Your Excellency. Mo Hanlin said in a low voice, Boss lady, he is the head of the Lin family, Lin Fengxian. The Lin family? Oh, it's kind of interesting. Qinya's eyes lit up, and she immediately showed an elegant smile, and said, It turned out to be the head of the Lin family, rude, rude. Lin Fengxian didn't expect Qinya to be such a talkative woman, and said with a smile, 2 years ago, when Lin went to Qingshan Pavilion to buy a batch of pills, he begged to see the proprietress. It's a pity that the proprietress had something urgent to go out at that time, and Lin just glanced at the proprietress from afar. 2 years have passed, and the proprietress has become even more beautiful. 2 years ago, Qinya was not impressed at all, but she still had a smile on her face. She looked at the martial artists of the Lin family behind Lin Fengxian, stared at Lin Lucian's body, and said, "This should be the second lady of the Lin family, right? Is really a little beauty, which makes the slave family feel ashamed." Lin Lucian stood behind Lin Fengxian, dressed in white clothes like snow, swaying green silk, soft figure, beautiful and delicate face. She was simply a standard little beauty. But to say that the beauty of the proprietress is not as good as her, it is not necessarily. It can only be said that each has its own temperament. "Boss, do you know the little girl?" Lin Fengxian said in some surprise. Qinya naturally didn't know Lin Lucian, but she had investigated Zhang Ruokan. Among them, one of the people who had the greatest influence on Zhang Ruokan was this Lin Da beauty. "So, she wrote down the name Lin Lucian by the way," Qinya said with a smile. "One of the 4 beauties of Yunwu County, the slave family has naturally heard of it, and it is said that even His Royal Highness the 9th Prince, who has a distinguished status, has been pursuing Miss Lin. It's enviable." A 16 or 17-year-old young martial artist from the Lin family sneered, "The 9th Prince is just making himself amorous. With his qualifications, even if he cultivates for 100 years, he can't be worthy of Sister Shanur." Another young martial artist of the Lin family, who was a little older, said with a smile, "After the year-end assessment, Sister Shanur will be engaged to His Royal Highness the 7th Prince. The 9 princes are toads who want to eat swan meat, which is not only stupid, but also ridiculous." These 2 young warriors of the Lin family are called Lin Chengwu and Lin Tianwu respectively. Lin Lucian, Lin Chengwu, and Lin Tianwu are the 3 best young geniuses selected by the Lin family. On behalf of the Lin family, participate in the year-end assessment. Qinya touched her snow-white chin, as if she had discovered some great secret, and said, "It's really a thing to congratulate Miss Lin on being engaged to His Royal Highness the 7th Prince. If the news spreads, I'm afraid that the women of the entire royal city will be envious and jealous because of this." Lin Qishan pursed her lips gently, and her eyes showed a little joy. After all, being able to marry the 7th Prince is definitely the dream of countless women in Yunwu County. She's so close to her dream now. The year-end assessment is divided into literary examination and martial arts examination. Liberal arts examinations are not taken seriously. Even if you get the first place in the literary exam, you will only be praised a few words at most. Only when performing well in the martial arts examination can you get rich rewards from the royal family. The martial arts examination has begun. The first round of the martial arts examination, test the strength. In the martial arts field, there are black stone plates of different sizes, which are divided into 10 heavyweights. The smallest stone plate, only half a meter in diameter, weighs 100 catties. The largest stone plate, with a diameter of 3 meters, weighs 1,000 catties. In order of age, from small to large, test your strength in turn. Xiao Jun advocated that Yulin was the first to enter the martial arts field. This year, she was only 6 years old, 1 meter tall, beautiful, well-behaved and cute. Wow! The little county lord walked to the black stone plate with a diameter of only half a meter, stopped, and the true qi in his body worked in the meridians. Her hands clasped the edge of the stone plate, looking a little difficult. After all, she lifted the stone plate in 100 catties. Bang! She struggled to throw the stone plate out, and it fell to the ground a meter away. The little county lord looked a little disappointed, and his eyes were fixed on the second stone plate again. The second stone plate weighed 200 catties, and the little county lord couldn't lift the stone plate with all his strength, so he could only give up and retreat. Little county lord, when he was 4 years old, he opened the Shenwu seal, and now he can actually lift a stone plate in 100 catties. It's really amazing, and she will definitely be an amazing woman in the future. King Yunwoo-jun, who was sitting above, also nodded lightly, and there was one more genius among his children, and his heart was naturally very happy. Subsequently, the 10 county lords and the 11 county lords also tested their strength, and their ages were 14 and 10 years old respectively. The cultivation of the 10 county lords reached the middle stage of the yellow extreme realm, and he lifted a stone plate weighing 200 catties and hit it 7 meters away. It's a pity that she couldn't lift the 300-pound stone plate, and finally had to give up. The 10 county lords also reached the middle stage of the yellow pole realm, and they also lifted the 200-pound stone plate and hit it 6 meters away. However, considering that the age of the 11th county lord is 4 years younger than that of the 10 county lords, the performance of the 11 county lords is even better when evaluated comprehensively. The first 3 county lords were all under the age of 14, and they were all women, and they were weaker than men in terms of strength, so they could only lift a stone plate weighing 200 catties at most. Next, it's the battle between the real geniuses. Lin Lushan, 15 years old this year, is the youngest among the martial artists except for the 3 county lords. So, she became the next young genius to walk into the martial arts. She skipped the 9 stone plates in front of her and walked in front of the 10th stone plate. The 10th stone plate, with a diameter of 3 meters, weighs 1,000 catties. Up. Lin Lushan used the surging true qi in her body, and with only one hand, she clasped the stone plate that was larger than her body with one hand, and easily lifted the stone plate weighing thousands of catties above her head. Ordinary people can't imagine that such a slender and delicate body can bear such a terrible weight. She's only 15. Lin Qishan's 5 fingers twisted, and the 1,000-pound stone plate immediately flew out of his palm and fell to the ground 15 meters away, smashing a huge pit on the ground. Oh my god. That's amazing. The Lin family has given birth to another great genius. It's just a woman, her physical body can't be compared to a man, but she can lift a 1,000-pound stone plate with one hand. I don't know how powerful her cultivation has been. King Yunwoo-jun, who was sitting above, also showed a look of amazement, and said, "Whose genius girl is this? This kind of talent, even compared to the 9 county lords, I'm afraid it's not much the same." The queen was very satisfied with Lin Lushan's performance, and said with a smile, "My lord, she is the daughter of the head of the Lin family, and her name is Lin Lushan. The concubine also thinks she is very good, and intends to let her be engaged to the 7th prince and get married." It turned out to be that little girl, and this king has some impressions of her. With her talent and family background, she is still worthy of care. King Yunwoo frowned slightly, looked at Zhang Ruokan who was standing on the edge of the martial arts, and said, "However, this king remembers that she and Jor were good playmates when she was a child, and they are cousins, so they can be regarded as childhood sweethearts." At the beginning, this king also discussed with the old man of the Lin family, and planned to order a doll for them. It's a pity that the incident happened 3 years ago, and the marriage matter is over. The queen laughed and said, "The king is confused. With Lin Lushan's current talent, how could he look down on the 9th prince? The two of them are no longer from the same world, and the gap will only grow in the future. With her talent, even if she is a side concubine for the 7th prince, I believe she will be quite willing. The Lin family will never let go of this opportunity to curry favor with the 7th prince." King Yunwoo also nodded lightly, and had to admit that the talent of the 9th prince was indeed far inferior to Lin Lushan. There's no way around it. In the martial arts world, the combination of strong men and weak women is very common. However, if the gap between a strong woman and a weak man is too big, it is never a good thing for either the man or the woman. The next person to enter the martial arts field to test his strength is Zhang Ruokan. 9th brother, you have to be careful, don't be crushed by the boulder. The 8th prince, who was standing on the side, smiled coldly with a grim look in his eyes. On the periphery of the royal family's martial arts field, a martial artist sneered and said, "The 9th prince is humiliating himself to participate in the year-end assessment. 3 months is too short, it is difficult to complete the marrow washing and pulse, and it is almost impossible to lift 100 caddies of stone plates. The little county lord was only 6 years old and lifted 100 caddies of stone plates, and the 9th prince is now 16 years old, so you don't have to guess to know that he will definitely not be able to lift the stone plate. That's the real shame. Instead of coming out and being embarrassed, he shouldn't have participated in the year-end assessment. Jong Ruokan didn't pay attention to those discussions at all, his eyes seemed very calm, and he walked towards the martial arts field calmly. When Jong Ruokan walked over, it was when Lin Lushan walked back. 5 paces apart, the two stopped at the same time, staring at each other. Lin Qishan stared at Jong Ruokan deeply, shook her head and sighed. Cousin, you shouldn't participate in the year-end assessment. With your qualifications, even if you complete the marrow washing and flushing pulse, it is impossible to lift 100-pound stone plate. If you do this, not only will you make a fool of yourself, but concubine Lin and the royal family will also have a shameless face. Why bother? Jong Ruokan frowned and said, Cousin Lushan, you are indeed very good and have good talents, but you can't belittle others to worthless, right? Lin Lushan stared at Jong Ruokan, with a little more disappointment in her eyes. Why didn't you listen to the advice? For you, living an ordinary life is the best choice. Why do you want to cultivate martial arts? You're not fit to go down this path. Originally, for the sake of being good playmates with Jong Ruokan when she was a child, she persuaded Jong Ruokan not to humiliate herself. But Jong Ruokan is too stubborn, and he doesn't look at how many caddies and tails he has. For this kind of person who does not measure himself and does not listen to others' advice, Lin Qishan has nothing to say, but she just thinks that Jong Ruokan is too stupid. Treasure it for yourself. Lin Qishan raised her snow-white chin and walked towards the outside of the martial arts field. The two passed by. Lin Qishan walked out of the martial arts arena and was sought after and praised by countless young martial artists, like the stars holding the moon, surrounding her in the center. At the age of 15, she was able to lift a stone plate weighing 1,000 caddies, and she could also throw the stone plate 15 meters away. Such a power made many young warriors who were slightly older than her present ashamed of themselves. And she is so beautiful. She is one of the 4 young beauties of Yunwu County, and she is destined to become the proud daughter of the sky. Congratulations to the Lin family master. The Lin family has given birth to another genius. With Miss Lin's talent, I am afraid that there are few young people in the entire royal city who can compare with her. A martial arts celebrity in the royal city said appreciatively. The head of the Wang family smiled and said, It is said that Miss Lin is about to get engaged to the 7th prince. She is really a talented woman. Lin Fengxian listened to everyone's flattery, and was naturally very comfortable. Of course, there are also many people who focus on Jong Ruokan standing in the martial arts, and most of them have a playful smile on their faces. All the families who have some friendship with the royal family have a certain understanding of this frail and sickly 9th prince. The extremely talented 7th prince and the waist-like 9th prince are like two extremes, making people can't believe that they are actually the sons of the king of Yunwu County. The gap between the two is too big. One is a dragon and the other is a worm. It can be said that the 9th prince's participation in the year-end assessment is simply a joke in the eyes of everyone. Of course, Qinya, who was sitting outside the Royal Martial Arts Arena, didn't think so, and when she saw Jong Ruokan walking into the martial arts arena, she finally opened a pair of beautiful eyes as if she had slept enough. I'm looking forward to it. Her recent exposure has a mesmerizing arc. Under the watchful eye, Jong Ruokan walked in front of the first stone plate and stopped. At this time, outside the martial arts arena, a large laughter sounded. Is there anything funnier than being 16 years old, but you can only choose the first stone plate to test your strength? Except for the 8th prince with a sneering face, the faces of the other princes and county lords were all pale. They felt that Jong Ruokan was disgrace to the royal family and made them lose face. Jong Ruokan stayed beside the first stone plate for a moment, then continued to walk towards the second stone plate, and then walked towards the third fast stone plate. What is he doing? The crowd was puzzled. Zhang Ruokan walked in front of the 10th stone plate and finally stopped. What? He wants to lift the 10th stone plate? It's too self-conscious. If I'm not mistaken, he only opened the Divine Martial Mark 3 months ago. The 8th prince snorted coldly and said, with his talent, even if he cultivates for 30 years, it is impossible to lift 1,000 caddies of stone plates. Stupid. Lin Lushan also stared at Zhang Ruokan, who was standing next to the 10th stone plate, and shook his head gently. When everyone's eyes were on Zhang Ruokan. Boom. Zhang Ruokan stepped on the ground, and a surging true qi spread from the soles of his feet to the ground. The waves of qi, centered on the soles of his feet, spread in all directions. Under the vibration of true qi, the stone plate weighing thousands of caddies immediately flew more than a meter high. Zhang Ruokan stretched out a hand, moved smoothly, and caught the huge stone plate with a diameter of 3 meters, supported by 5 fingers, like holding a saucer, and easily lifted the stone plate above his head. Seeing this scene, the entire royal martial arts field immediately quieted down, and many people even forgot to breathe. Zhang Ruokan's body stood straight, like a javelin, holding a stone plate weighing thousands of caddies, as if he had not used any strength, and looked very relaxed. How is this possible? The 8th prince's face turned pale, and his lips trembled a little. Those princes and county lords were also dumbfounded, their heads were blank, and they couldn't believe that the young man standing in the field could be the 9th prince. Just when everyone was still shocked, Zhang Ruokan suddenly punched the bottom of the stone plate. Boom! The 1,000-pound stone plate was beaten and flew 5 meters high. Subsequently, the stone disc fell at a faster rate. Under the impact of speed, coupled with the weight of the stone plate itself, the impact force is definitely far more than 1,000 caddies. However, Zhang Ruokan caught the stone plate steadily, and then, he held the stone plate with one hand, very smoothly and slowly, and gently put the stone plate back to the ground. Boom! The entire royal martial arts field has exploded. Everyone couldn't believe what they saw in front of them. Zhang Ruokan's hand just now was definitely more shocking than the strength that Lin Lushan showed just now. He was only 16 years old, and he had only opened the Shenwu seal 3 months ago. What is impossible to happen, but it happened in front of everyone's eyes. His power. How can it be so strong? Lin Lushan's teeth clenched her lower lip, and her eyes stared at Zhang Ruokan. Such a result is too much for her to accept. Lin Fengxian was also shocked, staring at Zhang Ruokan standing in the martial arts arena, and his whole person seemed to be petrified. Ordinary young martial artists could only see that Zhang Ruokan's strength was strong, but the hearts of those martial artists who had cultivated to a high level were even more shocked. First of all, when Zhang Ruokan stepped on the ground, he was able to shake the 1,000-pound stone plate more than 1 meter above the ground, and it was not really just the power of the anti-shock. Instead, he injected the true qi in his body into the ground, and the true qi turned into layers of waves and hit the bottom of the stone plate. Under the superposition of layers of waves, the stone disc was shaken and flew up. If you only rely on the power of the anti-shock, shaking the 1,000-pound stone disc into the air, even a martial artist of the great perfection of the Yellow Extreme Realm will not be able to do it at all. His ability to control true qi was simply exquisite and meticulous, which made many of the older martial arts powerhouses present feel amazed and a little ashamed. Secondly, the 1,000-pound stone plate fell from a 5-meter-high air, and the impact was so terrifying that it was not at all something that a martial artist in the Yellow Extreme Realm could catch. However, Zhang Ruokan still used his true qi and turned into layers of waves, hitting the bottom of the stone plate to offset the impact of the stone plate's fall. It is precisely because of this that he was able to catch the falling stone plate steadily. Such a method can only be seen by a truly discerning martial arts powerhouse. It is precisely because of the clues that can be seen that the martial arts powerhouses present will be shocked and feel incredible. The 9 Prince's ability to control true qi is more subtle than that of many martial artists in the Zon Extreme Realm. A martial arts wizard was born. When Zhang Ruokan walked out of the martial arts arena and walked past Lin Lushan, Lin Qishan stared at him coldly, and said, "You are really hiding deep enough. Is this trying to humiliate me on purpose? Let me tell you, the power of a person can be quickly raised to an incredible level by taking the heavenly treasure. However, when you really fight, you don't have to be strong to win. The end of year assessment has just begun, and I'll show you the real gap between us later." Lin Lushan couldn't see Zhang Ruokan's subtle use of true qi at all, so he thought that Zhang Ruokan was lucky enough to take some kind of heavenly treasure to have his current powerful power. In fact, some ordinary people who mistakenly take exotic flowers and fruits may suddenly become infinitely powerful. Hearing Lin Lushan's words, Zhang Ruokan shook his head gently, didn't bother to pay attention to her, and walked straight towards concubine Lin. "Mother, I did it," Zhang Ruokan said. Concubine Lin, who was standing among the concubines, seemed to have been struck by lightning. Her eyes were shining, and she said with some trembling, "Chanur, is it really my dust?" Concubine Lin hugged Zhang Ruokan tightly and cried bitterly. She had waited too long for this day. I thought that it would never be possible to wait for this day, but I didn't expect that Zhang Ruokan did it, and he became a martial artist, a young powerhouse. Impress everyone and stop laughing at him. What she wants, in fact, is very simple. She just wants a fair treatment. The concubines, palace maids, and eunuchs standing on the side, after seeing this scene, began to think in their hearts, in the future, you must not offend concubine Lin. Good. The king of Yunwu County suddenly stood up, stared at Zhang Ruokan excitedly, and said, "Zhor is a late bloomer. This king is extremely pleased. No matter what the results of the year-end assessment are, the royal family will hold a banquet to celebrate for 3 days. Zhor, why don't you come and let this king take a closer look? Dust, quick, come and see your father." Concubine Lin wiped away her tears and immediately pulled Zhang Ruokan towards the king of Yunwu County. "Meet the king." Concubine Lin and Zhang Ruokan bowed at the same time. King Yunwu Jun stared at Zhang Ruokan and stared carefully, and said, "Your cultivation has reached the yellow extreme realm small pole level, right?" Just now, Zhang Ruokan showed his strength, and naturally he couldn't hide it from the eyes of King Yunwu County. Zhang Ruokan said, "Yes. In 3 months, reaching the small pole of the yellow pole realm is definitely not something that ordinary people can do. Zhor, what adventures have you gotten recently?" Yunwu County King Road. Zhang Ruokan said neither humbly nor arrogantly. "Back to the king, I did get some adventures. But that's my secret, and I have the right not to tell it, and I don't want to make it public." Bold. The king is your own father, and what secrets can't even be told to your own father? The queen said angrily. King Yunwu raised his hand slightly, stopped the queen from continuing, stared at Zhang Ruokan with a look of appreciation, and said, "Every martial artist has his own secret. Since you don't want to say it, this king won't force you. Take part in the year-end assessment. I'm looking forward to your next performance." The next person to walk into the martial arts field was the 9 county lords. Zhu Jun advocates that Yushi is born with a natural appearance, white skin, tall figure, and an elegant aristocratic temperament. Her age is only 1 day older than Zhang Ruokan, her martial arts talent is not under Lin Lushan, and her beauty is not under Lin Lushan, and she is also one of the 4 beauties of Yunwu County, and she is known as Wangcheng Shuangyan, along with Lin Lushan. The 9 county lord also lifted the 10th stone plate and threw it 13 meters away. His strength was slightly weaker than Lin Lushan's. Lin Lushan threw the stone plate 15 meters away. The 9 county lord frowned slightly, walked out of the martial field, and stood beside Zhang Ruokan, with a charming smile in his eyes. "Ninth brother, you have to be careful when Wang Mountain hunts later. I'm your rival." Zhang Ruokan and the Lord of the 9 counties are of the same age, so they often played together when they were children. After the 9 counties Lord opened the Shenwu seal, he spent his time repairing the martial arts, and the relationship between the two gradually became unfamiliar. The current Zhang Ruokan was even more unfamiliar with the 9 county lords, so he just nodded lightly and said no more. The next person to walk into the martial arts field was the 8th Prince Zhang Ji. Originally, the 8th prince thought that he had reached the small pole position, and he could easily crush Zhang Ruokan during the year-end assessment, and he could even be appreciated by the king of Yunwu County. However, Zhang Ruokan's performance was too amazing, which seriously hit his self-confidence. I'm going to have to lift the 10th stone plate. Zhang Ruokan is just a waste. He can do it, and I will definitely be able to do it. Originally, the 8th prince had just reached the small pole position, and he didn't think about lifting the 10th stone plate at all, but under Zhang Ruokan's oppression, he desperately wanted to lift the 10th stone plate. Give it to me. The 8th prince clasped the huge stone plate with both hands, and the green tendons all over his body stood out, and he really slowly lifted the stone plate. However, as soon as he lifted half a meter high, his 5 fingers slipped, and the stone plate suddenly fell down and smashed on the instep of the 8th prince. Ah! A pig-killing scream came out of the mouth of the 8th prince. My feet, my feet. Help! His foot bones were broken. Then, he fainted in pain and lay in the center of the martial arts field like a dead pig. The 2 guards immediately rushed into the martial field, removed the 1,000 caddies of boulders, and carried the 8th prince down. Next, another young warrior walked into the martial arts. The age of these warriors was all over the age of 16, and they were the elite selected from various families, and more than half of them lifted the 1,000 caddies of stone plates. Among them, there were 3 people with the best performance, and their cultivation had all reached the great pole of the yellow pole realm, and they threw the stone plate 20 meters away. The 5th prince, aged 19, was a cultivator of the great pole of the yellow extreme realm, and threw the stone plate 20 meters away. Situ Linzhong, 17 years old, the first master of the younger generation of the Situ family, the cultivator of the great pole of the yellow pole realm, threw the stone plate 23 meters away. Shui Kai, 19 years old, was the grandson of the national teacher of the dynasty, and the cultivator of the great pole of the yellow pole realm, threw the stone plate 24 meters away. The first round is the strength assessment. In addition to Zhang Ruokan, Lin Luxian, and the Lord of the 9 Counties, the performance of these 3 people is the most dazzling. Next, there is the second round of assessment, Wang Mountain Hunting. Only the warriors who lift the 10th stone plate are eligible to participate in the second round of assessment. In the first round, there were a total of 43 young warriors who lifted the 10th stone plate. The guards moved 43 sturdy antelopes, each of which resembled a baby elephant with sharp horns and silver armor. On the back of the antelope is a 1.5 meter long iron wire bow and 5 thunderbolts. The national teacher stood on the stone platform and said loudly, "If you can lift a stone plate weighing 1,000 caddies, it means that your strength can already fight against first-order brute beasts. However, you must remember that even the power of a first-order brute is even more powerful than you imagined, and the speed of a first-order brute is even faster. With your strength, only by using thunder arrows can you break through the skin of the brute beast and shoot the brute beast to death. Each person only has 5 arrows, and the more beasts you shoot, the stronger the beasts you shoot, and the better your results. Only young warriors who shoot brute beasts can participate in the third assessment, the school competition. Wang Mountain, full of dangers, may even die. If you encounter a second-order brute beast, you should flee for your life immediately. Wangshan hunting, start now. Lin Luxian's legs kicked the ground, jumped lightly, showed a beautiful and dexterous body, landed on the back of one of the antelope horses, stared at Zhang Ruokan, and said, "Cousin, the strength assessment is only my weakness. Now is the time to really give full play to my strength. I hope you don't get too far behind me." Drive. Smack. Lin Luxian swung a whip on the buttocks of the antelope, and the antelope immediately opened its iron hooves, broke away from the dust, and rushed into Wang Mountain.